Good afternoon. Let's talk business now. We are doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons right after Ben Shapiro. And just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air right now, 790 KBC. Streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, don't break out the champagne just yet, but we did see a rally today coming off the worst day in nearly 2 years for the stock market. Stocks did finish higher today, clawing back some of the losses we saw in the previous session. And in fact, starting Friday, we saw that sell-off after the jobs report came in. Investors taking a bit of a pause from concerns that the economy could be heading toward a recession. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of nearly 300 points. It was the best day for that blue chip index in more than a week, coming off the more than 1,000-point drop we saw in the previous session, and also a big drop on Friday. The S&P 500 managed a closing gain of 54 points, and the NASDAQ rebounded today 167 points. All of this after that washout yesterday, which got started in Japan with the Nikkei plunging about 12.5% today. The Nikkei rebounded about 10%. The volatility index, the VIX index, the so-called Wall Street Fear Index, has surged over the past week, but it too took a bit of a breather today. We saw the yields on government debt rising today by the most in at least a month as risk-off sentiment in the financial markets faded a bit. The yield on the 10-year note now 3.89%. Rivian, the EV truck maker, reporting quarterly results that were largely in line with expectations. And Rivian shares closed up 19 cents today to 14.80. On the political front, as you just heard at the top of the hour, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Vice President Harris's running mate pick, introducing himself to the nation today. Joining us live now on Your Money, the markets, the economy, politics, and the whole works, the one and only Ben Stein is with us now for our occasional Frank and Stein conversation. Of course, Ben Stein, a well-known financial as well as political commentator, author of numerous books. And it's that Ben Stein, too. He's the game show host, Win Ben Stein's Money, and, of course, famous in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, playing the economics professor in one of the most famous scenes in American cinema. And Ben Stein is with us here for Frankenstein. Good afternoon, Ben Stein.
How are you, sir?
Wonderful. A lot to unpack across the board in the financial markets as well as the political news today. First of all, your reaction to the breaking news in the last hour or so, the pick of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be Vice President Harris's running mate. Your reaction, Ben Stein?
Well, it is true that he really did do something along the lines of COVID fraud, of claiming damages and injuries from COVID fraud when that wasn't true. That's a very serious matter. Fraud against the federal government is a pretty serious matter, very serious. Second, if it's true that he's had at least a couple of DUIs, and that may not be true, that may be an exaggeration, that's serious. But I think what's most interesting is she's supposed to be super left-wing, and now apparently he's even more left-wing, and he is described as Soros with a hunting jacket on. And I don't know how that's going to help her, but I guess somebody must have explained it to her. But she scares me so much, and she lacks anything, even remotely, in the way of adequate credentials for a president, that whatever's wrong with him is trivial by comparison.
All right, so we've heard the reaction from the Trump camp, and looks like they're cheering on that side, right?
Well, I think the Trump camp figures that Mrs. Harris could hardly have picked the worst running mate, but at least that's what they're saying, and they can't believe she picked him. But who knows? I don't know who her advisors and friends and pals are. I'm told they're the extreme left wing of the Democrat Party, but I really don't know. There's nothing about her whatsoever that impresses me in a favorable way. I just don't know what's going on. And yet I gather she has a good chance of winning, and that's, to me, a really heartbreaking thing, because if that's true, I think it's 100% because of the increasing racialization of American life, and the fact that because she's black, she would get a very large number of votes, even without any other credential.
What's your reaction to his
And by the way,
widely reported comments today? What's your reaction? It's all over the internet. The governor Walz touting his progressive values in quotes and condemning critics who refer to them as socialism. He's quoted on that video saying, "Don't ever shy away from our progressive values." He said, "One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness." What are we to make of that?
Well, that's kind of interesting and kind of cute. But I think for him to have said that anyone who opposes him is weird that's really almost crazy. I don't get it. I mean, to say that 75, 80, 85 million voters in America are weird, it's just I don't get it. It reminds me a lot of Mrs. Clinton saying that the Republicans were deplorables. I mean, that was a very, very, very large fraction of the American people. To call them deplorable is I don't get it. That's a very serious negative word. I don't like this intense splitting up of America that the Harris campaign is doing. But I don't get how it advances her or anyone else.
The whole year has been weird, right? Especially with this how this election has played out with President Biden on the sidelines now, and Vice President Harris just installed officially as the Democratic nominee, and now picking the Minnesota governor as her running mate. All of this less than a month after the assassination attempt on President Trump. What are your thoughts about this whirlwind, this political whirlwind we've seen in recent weeks?
I think the people who are trivializing the assassination attempt on Mr. Trump I think they must be either very stupid or extremely nasty people. There's no joke to shoot at the president of the United States with a .30 caliber rifle, and the fact that it didn't kill him does not mean that it should be trivialized. And something's really wrong at the FBI and the other government agencies that are supposedly involved in law enforcement. Secret Services. We have a saying in Yiddish, "Garnished helpfen," which means that nothing would help. I mean, they are such a mess, nothing would help them. But we expect the FBI to be throwing themselves into this, and they're not. No press conference about it, no spreading out of data or exhibits. And Mrs. Harris has not had a press conference on that specific subject. Mr. Biden has not had a press conference on that specific subject. What the heck? I mean, if this object of the assassination attempt had been a Democrat, they'd be screaming from every rooftop in America.
You remind me of another expression. If you can't say something nice, say it in Yiddish. So that point is very well taken. Let me ask you this. Speaking, let's talk Middle East here for a moment, with Iran threatening Israel in a big way, and the U.S. also mobilizing forces in the Middle East. Give us your reaction to the recent action by Israel and the ongoing Hamas-Israel war, which started, of course, October 7th when Israel was attacked by Hamas, and now Iran threatening Israel with an attack at any moment.
Well, Iran have always been difficult, nasty, horrible people. It's not a coincidence that they have been labeled the number one most dangerous state sponsor of terrorism in the world for decades. And the fact that the Ayatollahs and so forth are in there, thanks to the help and patronage of Jimmy Carter, is a disgrace. And the fact that the Democrats have basically, especially Mr. Obama, have basically helped keep the murdering mullahs, I just made that up, in place is not a good thing. I don't get it. There's obviously some connection, at least to me, it's obvious, between the mullahs and the Democrat Party, and that's not a good thing.
And, of course, we have Ukraine and Russia continuing. Any thoughts about how that big war is playing out?
Well, that's an amazing thing. I mean, I don't think anyone would have given the I beg your pardon, the Ukrainians even the slightest chance of lasting as long as they have and doing as much damage as they have done to the Russians. I don't think anyone would have believed that possible. You are young man, and I'm actually too young to remember this, but it is very reminiscent of the invasion by Stalin in late 1939 of Finland, and everyone thought, well, Russia, biggest army in the world, biggest air force in the world, they will just squash Finland like a bug. But actually, Finland squashed the Soviet Union like a bug, and really just disposed of them in very short order, and with terrible casualties for the Russians. But then Stalin revitalized his army, and they threw everything they had, and finally they won. But they did not win anywhere near what they were wanting, and later they had to give it all back because the Finns hooked up with the Nazis. Not a good thing for the Finns, but Russia has not really covered itself with glory in this war. We would have thought it would have won in no time at all, and B, the war crimes that they have committed are just breathtaking. Mass rapes of women with their throats slit and buried, still alive. These are not very nice people. Let's put it mildly. These are war criminals. Man. Let's call a spade a spade. I'm an old man. I don't have that much longer to live, so I'll just tell the truth. These are war crimes. Russia at this point is a serious war criminal state, and that's a scary thought since they have something like 6,000 nuclear warheads.
Given the movement reported of Russian aircraft to Iran with it's believed military support, are we on the verge of World War III here?
It depends on how you define World War III, but we're in a very, very dangerous position. I think we're in the most dangerous position since in the post-war period, in the post-World War II period, and I blame that very, very, very much on the Democrat Party, but also on the Republicans for not being willing to spend enough on defense. I mean, when I was a lad, the U.S. routinely spent 10% of the GDP on defense, and that was in peacetime. And why we're spending 3% or 3.5% just mystifies me.
We're on the air live with Ben Stein for our Frank and Stein conversation. And P.S., it's been quite a week in the financial markets with that jobs report, which came in weaker than expected. The nation's unemployment rate did tick higher to 4.3%. Ben Stein, give us your reaction to what we've seen with this latest economic news and recession talk being reignited and the gyrations we've seen in the financial markets.
Well, it was J.P. Morgan who, when asked about the stock market, said it will fluctuate. I think it was, and it will fluctuate. And as I say to my many friends who I meet as I'm shopping at the pavilions in West Hollywood, please don't waste your time worrying about one day's movement, or even 2 days, or even a week's movement in the stock market.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Named one of the best personal finance podcasts, The Stacking Benjamin Show with Joe and his friends makes financial literacy fun.
We see money inefficiency, OG, around us all the time. We've got a few skeletons sitting out in the open, and maybe we need to broom them into the closet, if you know what I mean.
Nope, take that out.
What is...
Whatever you were going for didn't land right. Who's got a shovel and some lime?
Maybe you need to do that with your financial picture. I don't know.
Find out more by searching the Stacking Benjamins podcast, wherever you listen.
It doesn't predict anything, and unless you're a day trader, and those guys by definition don't make any money, it's not worth your time to do it.
All right, it will fluctuate, by the way, and you're right, it was J.P. Morgan who famously said that. Now we're hearing again, inflation supposedly has been going down, although of course it has seen a tremendous rise over the last 10 years or so, about 25% for pretty much everything across the board. Ben Stein, as you're doing your shopping today, gold, meanwhile, kissing record highs again in the last week or so. What about inflation, and what could we expect on that front?
Inflation does not go away readily. It's like a bad next door neighbor who bothers you with his loud music and his children's revving up their cars, like I have in my Beverly Hills neighborhood. It's not going to go away anytime soon. And what would make it go away? Just higher and higher interest rates. They're already insanely high. Not insanely high. They're already very, very high. I don't see what's going to stop it except a recession, and we don't want a recession. So I don't see what's going to make it stop, but it might very well slow down.
All right. What do you see happening on the real estate front, Ben Stein? Do you see any canaries in the coal mine? Some places across the country seeing a lot of places for sale all of a sudden as homeowners association dues get big and a lot, and some property values are starting to come down. Do you see any canaries in the coal mine here?
No, I don't actually. I mean, I don't. My houses are in pretty nice neighborhoods, and I don't see any sign of the canary in the coal mine in Beverly Hills or Rancho Mirage or Malibu or other places where I have property. So I don't see them. Eventually, of course, that will fluctuate as well. There's almost nothing as price doesn't fluctuate.
We're on the line with Ben Stein, and of course, as is the case always when you're on, people want to know, is it really you, Ben Stein? And they want to make sure that it's you who did that famous scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So I don't know if you've taken the role yet, but if you haven't, please go right ahead.
Adams, Adamley, Adamowski, Butler, Bueller. Anyway, that's enough for now. Have fun. You guys have fun, and just bear in mind, if you see someone that looks a lot like me buying salmon, it's me.
We'll let you get back to your important shopping, Ben Stein. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. 790 KBC welcomes Howard Jones and ABC with Haircut 100 coming to the YouTube Theater August 20th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com, and right now caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Tickets furnished by Live Nation. Bit of a rebound today on Wall Street. The Dow up nearly 300 points, not quite erasing the more than 1,000-point drop we saw in the previous session. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 294 points at 38,998. The S&P 500 moved up 54 at the bell to 5,240, and the NASDAQ gained 167 at 16,367. The yield on the 10-year note is back up to 3.89%. Bond yields popping today. The price of oil, meanwhile, pulling back part of the day and then rising 26 cents to close at $73.20 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. And Brent crude in London, the global benchmark, gained 18 cents to settle at $76.48 a barrel. Oil futures did end modestly higher today after the stock market clawed back some of the previous day's sharp losses. Of course, the traders keeping an eye on what's happening in the Middle East. Simmering tensions between Israel and Iran that could pose a threat to crude oil supplies from the Middle East and set off the Middle East powder keg. We'll be talking more about that shortly, live on the air here, coming up in the next half hour. Cryptos rebounding from yesterday's lows. Bitcoin right now pulling back again at around $500 lower to $56,280. Ethereum down 13 at $2,475. And Doge has moved to 10 cents. Taking a look at price of gold. Let's see if we can bring up the price of gold here at the moment. It's been bouncing around near all-time highs. Right now down $2.60 at $2,429 an ounce. The VIX index, the volatility index, Wall Street's so-called fear index, pulling back today by about 28%, down 10 to 27.71. Among the movers today, Uber on its latest earnings news, moving up 11%. Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines up 7.5%. Among the stocks pulling back today, we see shares of Henry Schein. This is a company that came out with earnings and was also impacted by a recent cyber attack. Henry Schein is a dental equipment distributor. That stock moved sharply lower today, down just about 8%. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Watching the latest news from the Middle East. Israeli warplanes swooping low over Lebanese capital Beirut today, setting off a series of sonic booms that rattled windows across the city minutes before the head of Lebanon's Hezbollah was set to give an address. The Israeli Air Force did strike a Hezbollah military base where terrorists were located and operating today in the area of in a village in Lebanon, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. In addition, the fighter jets also struck a Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure site in southern Lebanon. This as Iran is threatening Israel with retaliation. And also, we're watching the situation here in the U.S. with an alleged Iranian agent plotting to hire hitmen to assassinate U.S. government officials, including possibly former President Trump, according to sources and a federal criminal complaint. The New York Post is reporting the latest on this one. A Pakistani national accused of planning political assassinations in New York City this month or early September and paid $5,000 in advances to men he believed to be contract killers, according to the U.S. attorney in New York. Joining us live now, Lisa DAFTARI, Middle East expert, editor of the Foreign Desk. She's on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Lisa DAFTARI. Lisa, thank you very much for coming to the line and give us your reaction to this latest news.
It's more of the same. Everyone waiting, global markets reacting, so much going on here in the United States with regards to our presidential election, obviously playing a role in what's happening around the world as well. Look, it's all about posturing and deterrence, and it seems like there's a lack of that going on where the Islamic Republic is looking to retaliate against Israel. And will do so, but what will that retaliation look like? And that is what everybody is waiting for. I have a less popular belief that the Islamic Republic, as much as it wants to talk big, it doesn't want to go big, meaning they will have to retaliate because of all the saber rattling, all of the rogue talk. They have to appear big and mighty and powerful, and for that reason, they will retaliate in some form. They will want it to hurt. But what the last thing they want to do is get themselves directly dragged into a larger escalation. You have to look at the last 45 years from the first day that this regime came into power in 1979 after toppling the Shah of Iran. The first thing that they did was invest in proxies to do their dirty work in the region. And to that end, they're not suicidal. They don't want to get involved in a larger escalation. They know that Israel is ready and very much willing to pounce. And for that reason, they will leave it up to the proxies to do the dirty work. What we saw in April was a retaliation by the Islamic Republic that came from Iranian soil. We might see something similar to that, or have Hezbollah do it with better proximity to Israel. And if Hezbollah is the one to carry out that retaliation, it will hurt more. We do hope that Israel's defense mechanisms can block all the missiles that come through from Lebanon, but that is probably not the case. I think that it will definitely be a stronger punch than we saw in April, but it will get the job done with regards to retaliation and what the Islamic Republic is looking to do. And again, they want to stay in power. They want to spread their influence. They want to spread their brand of Shiite Islam throughout the region, and getting involved in a larger scale where Israel will then have the pretext to hit whether it's nuclear sites or other very vital infrastructure inside of Iran won't be something that they want to get themselves involved in.
All right, so we heard today from the U.S. Secretary of State trying to get all sides to ease off. But if, in fact, Iran carries through on its threat to attack Israel, will Israel then take out all of Iran's nuclear program?
That might be something that they would be looking to do. Look, for as long as the Islamic Republic is in power and has the money that this administration has allowed it to accumulate, over $100 billion in oil sales, for example, for as long as the Islamic Republic has the funding, they will continue to fund proxies that will continue to want Israel to be off the map. That threat is not going anywhere. So when the United States, whether it's Blinken or Biden or Kamala Harris, try to tell for Israel, for example, to back off, if Israel stopped the war today, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Islamic Republic, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, insurgencies inside Syria and Iraq, all of those that have encircled this ring of fire that we call that have encircled Israel, they will not stop. They will continue with their radicalism and their extremism and their terrorism because their goal is to have Israel off the map. So for that reason, Israel will have no choice.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show.
Tucker Carlson, what is it that you think that people gravitate
I'm not
towards?
self-aware. I refuse to be self-aware. I don't even look in mirrors at all, which you can probably tell from my appearance. I don't have a crazy high IQ, or I really don't have that many skills. I would say my main skill is I believe my instincts. I don't hesitate to follow my instincts, ever. To the extent that I have, I've gotten in trouble.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
But to eliminate this existential threat to the best of its ability. Now, if that means retaliating in a meaningful way that will have significant consequences for Israel's national security, then of course it will take the opportunity to do so. I think Israel is collecting a lot of intelligence, as we saw from the Haniyeh assassination on Iranian soil against a very significant Hamas leader. Israel is doing its due diligence with regards to moving slowly in certain ways and collecting intelligence on hits that will be more significant, that will have reverberations. Inside Lebanon, we're seeing the same thing. Every time that Israel has hit a Hezbollah site, it has tried to be as targeted and focused as possible in those hits, trying to prevent a larger scale war from starting. But, again, Frank, it's very difficult to gauge what an escalation will be and will look like. When everyone on last week was talking about this Haniyeh assassination signifying an escalation, many people will call October 7th the biggest escalation, and now we're just basically, going through the motions of what this war looks like. But again, until the Islamic Republic decides that it does not want to fund its proxies, that it will not send out its proxies to do this kind of dirty work against Israel and the United States, for that matter, as we saw from the hit at the Iraqi base yesterday and many other hits against U.S. assets in the region, including the Houthis on the Red Sea and others. This is something that is really, there's two sides here. Either you're with the terrorists or you're fighting against them.
On the air live with Lisa DAFTARI, Middle East expert, editor of the Foreign Desk. And just, 24 hours ago, we got the news that 5 U.S. service members and 2 contractors were injured in a rocket attack at an Iraqi Air Force base. The Pentagon today saying that militants supported by Iran were responsible for that attack at the Al-Assad Air Base. U.S. forces in Iraq and neighboring Syria have repeatedly tangled with such groups as Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza has expanded with spillover violence there. And what about this direct attack on that base in which American service personnel were injured, some of them very seriously? 2 of them had to be evacuated for further medical care, according to the reports. What about a possible U.S. Retaliation based on what happened there?
This White House has done everything its ability to distance itself from this narrative that the Islamic Republic is responsible for so much of the turmoil in the Middle East. If you recall, after October 7th, Secretary Blinken tried to, again, distance himself from that narrative that the Islamic Republic is responsible for funding Hamas. And then we saw, based on a Wall Street Journal expose, that, of course, it was the Islamic Republic. We knew, but, it's nice to see it in a nicely printed, American news outlet that, yes, it was the Islamic Republic that trained, that gave the weapons, that did everything that carried out, that Hamas was able to carry out October 7th. Since then, and for years, think about the policy of this White House has been to get back into that nuclear deal that President Obama signed and President Trump pulled out of. But imagine how egregious the crimes of the Islamic Republic have been, that they have not been able to, as much as they tried, get into another nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic. But instead, they allowed them to embolden themselves and enrich themselves by removing vital sanctions, removing the Houthis from the terror list, giving them, different coupons and vouchers to be able to, again, cash in. There's an issue here with of this White House, and it's going forward and looking at this election, really need to prioritize foreign policy because it comes back to our national security as well.
Yep.
There's so many lines.
Let me ask you this,
connect
Lisa.
to.
We did get the
Sure.
word from Speaker Mike Johnson calling on President Biden to release weapons to Israel after that suspected rocket attack we just spoke about hit U.S. service members in Iraq. So the Republicans putting pressure now on President Biden to release more weapons to Israel after that latest attack. Do you think that'll happen?
I hope that this can be a partisan issue going forward, where that it's clear now that Israel needs weapons and it needs X, Y, and Z list of weapons to get the job done, and that has always been the goal from October 8th till now. That Israel has two goals in this war. Number one is to get the hostages back, which it has not been successful in doing so. There remain 100 or more hostages still in captivity, as well as 5 Americans. And number two is to decimate Hamas to the best of its ability. Right now, they're looking at multiple fronts. Right now, it's not just Hamas, but it's now Hezbollah, it's the Houthis, it's Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're in the West Bank, they're in Gaza, and they're surrounding Israel. So I think it would behoove all lawmakers to look at this as a partisan, nonpartisan issue, and to go forward and to give Israel the tools that it needs to fight this international war against an international enemy. And I don't think that radicalism, as we saw, based on the attack on the Iraqi base, this is not just weapons pointed towards Israel, it's weapons pointed towards the United States as well. So it's an enemy that really haunts all of us, and Israel's on the front line. And if they have the ability to decimate these groups, we should give them the chance to do so.
Lisa DAFTARI, will keep an open line to you as all of this continues to unfold. Lisa DAFTARI, Middle East expert, editor of the Foreign Desk, and on Twitter at Lisa DAFTARI. Now, of course, X, formerly known as Twitter, at Lisa DAFTARI. Lisa, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Mottek On Money continues in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. How's this for a credit card bill? $1.14 trillion. American consumers continue to rack up credit card debt, hitting a record $1.14 trillion. That was just released by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York today. Consumers collectively owe a record $1.14 trillion in credit card debt. Also, as credit card interest rates hit all-time highs, so does growing carryover debt. Looks like a new bank rate survey on credit card debt was released today and found that half of credit card holders carry debt from month to month. That's up from 44% in January. And joining us live now is Ted Rossman, Bankrate Senior Industry Analyst who specializes in credit cards, credit scores, and other personal finance topics. Ted, thanks for taking the call and for coming to the line this afternoon.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll take it from the top and tell us about the survey that you just released today.
We found that half of credit card holders are carrying debt from month to month. That's up 6 percentage points from the beginning of the year, and it's actually the highest we've seen since March of 2020. We found that 6 in 10 people with credit card debt have had it for at least a year, and that's up 10 percentage points from 3 years ago. There's really a cumulative effect going on here. We think about high inflation, high interest rates. It's making this debt harder to pay off.
Certainly is, especially since credit card interest rates are at an all-time high too, right?
Very close. Yeah, they're technically a couple of basis points below the record that was set back in April. But for all intents and purposes, yeah, this is basically the highest credit card rate environment we've ever seen. The current national average is 20.73%. A little bit of context is that rates were 16.3% when the Fed started raising rates back in March of 2022. So it kind of went from bad to worse, basically. My top tip here is to get a 0% balance transfer credit card. The good news is that even in a high rate environment, you can still get no interest for up to 21 months on cards like the Wells Fargo Reflect and the Citi Simplicity. These are offers for new customers, and it's not a free lunch, of course. Once the clock runs out, then the rate goes way up. And there is usually a 3 to 5% transfer fee, but nonetheless, this is a great debt payoff tactic if you're disciplined about making progress.
On the air live with Ted Rossman at Bankrate, and it looks like the credit card delinquency rate I saw also has hit levels not seen in at least a decade. Right? People falling behind. What does that tell us about the pressure consumers are under nowadays?
That's true, but what's so interesting about that is that banks don't seem particularly alarmed. I know it sounds very negative, the highest credit card delinquency rate in about 12 years, and it's doubled in the past couple of years, and yet banks are not concerned. And that's because they view this largely as normalization after the weirdness of the pandemic. Delinquencies were really low during the pandemic because people used stimulus money to pay off debt. They were spending less for a while. Balances were way down for a time, too. They were down 17% at one point from their 2019 high to early 21. Now, since then, balances are up 45% and delinquencies are up considerably as well. Banks are already seeing these delinquencies level off. So we had the big jump off the weird artificial lows. Now it feels like more of a plateau. Banks seem to feel the worst is behind us. They seem to feel that this is maybe more of a leading indicator because I feel like other aspects of the economy are just now catching on. Like this week's stock sell-off was all about, is the job market weakening? Is manufacturing weakening? It feels like the move in credit card delinquencies came first, or at least that's what banks are hoping.
All right. Well, the banks may not be that concerned. Certainly consumers are concerned. What's the highest rate you've seen? I noticed one of the big department stores is just in the process of raising its rate to close to 40%.
Yeah, it's crazy. Those store cards are the worst offenders. There are dozens of store cards from prominent retailers in the low to mid 30% range. And, up until the past year or two, 29.99% was a threshold that few dared to cross. We kind of historically thought of that as the penalty rate. Like if you were 60 days late, you got put in the penalty box and you were charged 29.99%. But now a lot of retail cards are charging 30, 32, 35% just across the board. Of course, you can avoid it by paying in full, and then the interest rate doesn't matter. But otherwise, doesn't matter if you have great credit or lesser credit. If you have a card like that, Macy's would be one example. They're in the mid-30s, but plenty of retailers are in that realm. Some of it is these cards are easier to get, whereas for general purpose cards, the average is about 20%. But even there, some people are paying 15, but others are paying 25 or 30. Credit card rates represent your highest cost debt, most likely, by a wide margin. So that's why it's just really important to be systematic at paying this debt off.
All right. What do you think the Fed's next move will be following that washout we saw yesterday and the Fed holding the line on short-term rates last week, which, of course, impact a lot of consumer and business loans? A lot of people think they should have lowered rates last week already. What's your prediction on when rates will start to come down?
It seems increasingly likely that the Fed's going to implement a 0.5 point cut at its next meeting in mid-September. It was previously thought maybe that would be a baby step, a 1/4 point cut. Now a 0.5 point looks most likely, at least according to the CME FedWatch tool, which does a good job of analyzing investor expectations. And it seems like maybe there's another 1/4 point cut coming in November, and then maybe another 1/4 point cut in December. The best guess right now is rates might fall a percentage point by the end of the year. And then there's a good chance they could fall another percentage point, maybe even 1.5 next year. That's going to help the housing market a lot, and it could help stimulate some other economic activity. It's not going to make a big dent in the credit card market just because, let's say your rate goes from 20.7, the current average, to the high 19s or even low 19s. I mean, these are all high rates. It would make a difference for mortgages, though. I mean, if rates fall from the high 6s into the 5s, that would help.
Ted, thank you very much for taking the call. That is Ted Rossman, Bankrate Senior Industry Analyst, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Named one of the best personal finance podcasts, the Stacking Benjamin Show with Joe and his friends makes financial literacy fun.
We see money inefficiency, OG, around us all the time. We've got a few skeletons sitting out in the open, and maybe we need to broom them into the closet, if you know what I mean.
Nope, take that out.
What is...
Whatever you were going for didn't land right. Who's got a shovel and some lime?
Maybe you need to do that with your financial picture. I don't know.
Find out more by searching the Stacking Benjamins podcast, wherever you listen.